The river ran quietly through the small town of Willowbrook, winding like a silver ribbon under the morning sun. On most days, the water shimmered peacefully, carrying fallen leaves and the faint reflection of clouds. But to Eli, a 12-year-old boy with messy hair and torn shoes, the river meant something else entirely. It was his escape. Every morning before school, Eli would sit on the wooden bridge, dangling his bare feet over the water. He liked the sound of the current, the way it whispered as if it had secrets only he could hear. School wasn't his favorite place. The other boys laughed at his worn clothes, and his teacher scolded him for daydreaming. But the bridge? The bridge listened. It didn't judge. That was where he met old Ben. Ben was a quiet man with a gray beard, wrinkled hands, and a hat that had seen too many summers. Nobody in town really knew much about him. Some said he had once been a sailor. Others claimed he'd fought in a war long ago. He lived in a small shack near the river, alone with only his dog, Rusty. For company, most people ignored him, except Eli. One cold morning, as the boy sat shivering on the bridge, a rough but kind voice spoke behind him. "Careful there, lad. Fall in, and that river'll carry you halfway to the sea." Eli turned to see the old man smiling. Leaning on his walking stick, "I won't fall," Eli said quickly. Though his legs were trembling from the chill, Ben chuckled. "That's what I used to say when I was your age." The boy grinned. "Were you my age once?" "Oh, a long time ago. Back when fish still jumped high enough to splash your face if you weren't careful." He pointed at the water. "You like the river?" Eli nodded. "It's quiet. Nobody yells here." Ben's eyes softened. He could see the sadness hidden behind the boy's brave smile. "Tell you what," the old man said. "You come here after school and I'll teach you how to fish. You'll learn to listen to the water." "She talks, you know." Eli's eyes widened. "The river talks?" Ben winked. "Only to those who listen close enough." From that day on, the boy and the old man became friends. Every afternoon, Eli would run to the bridge, and together they'd sit for hours, fishing, talking, laughing. Ben told stories about faraway places, about ships that sailed through storms and skies that stretched forever. Eli listened with wonder, his imagination painting pictures brighter than any book. He learned to tie knots, to mend a fishing line, and even to whistle like the river birds. Sometimes Ben would give him an old sandwich or a piece of chocolate wrapped in paper. "Fuel for dreamers," he'd say with a wink. For the first time in a long while, Eli felt seen, not for his ragged clothes or quiet voice, but for who he was. One evening as the sun dipped low, Ben grew quiet. His usual smile faded as he stared at the golden light over the water. "Everything changes, lad," he murmured. "One day this river'll be different. Maybe the bridge too. But kindness, that's the only thing that lasts." "You remember that?" Eli frowned. "Why are you talking like that?" Ben smiled sadly. "Just old bones thinking aloud." Winter came. The river froze along its edges and the bridge grew slippery with frost. Eli still visited, wrapping himself in an old coat. Ben was always there, waiting with Rusty wagging his tail. But one day when Eli arrived, the shack was empty. No fire in the chimney, no footprints in the snow. He waited for hours. Nothing. Days passed. Still no Ben. Worried, Eli asked around the village. Most people shrugged. "Old Ben? Probably gone off somewhere." "He was a drifter," said the shopkeeper. "He's just an old fool," muttered another. "Don't waste your time." But Eli couldn't accept that. He searched by the river, calling out Ben's name until his voice broke. Finally, down by the rocks near the far end of the bridge, he found Ben's walking stick, half buried in the snow. Eli stood there staring at it, his heart sinking. Rusty was nowhere to be seen. The river, once a friend, now felt cruel, silent and endless. That night, Eli went home and cried quietly into his pillow. For the first time, the bridge felt empty. Months passed. Spring came, melting the snow and bringing wildflowers back to the riverbanks. But the old man did not return. Still, Eli kept visiting the bridge. He repaired a broken plank, cleaned the edges, and built a small wooden sign that read, "Ben's Bridge, a place for kindness." Sometimes, he'd bring food and leave it by the sign for travelers or anyone hungry passing by. He remembered what Ben had said. Kindness is the only thing that lasts. Years went by. Eli grew up, He finished school, went to college in the city, and became a teacher. Yet every summer, he returned to Willowbrook, to the river, the bridge, and the memories that had shaped his heart. The townsfolk had changed too. Some still whispered about the strange boy who once talked to an old hermit, but most had forgotten Ben entirely. All except Eli. He'd sit by the bridge in the evenings, thinking of the man who had once believed in him when no one else had. Then, one summer, something unexpected happened. Eli, now 25, wearing a teacher's jacket and carrying a satchel full of books, found a small dog sitting near the bridge. Old, scruffy, one ear bent, just like Rusty, Rusty, he whispered, kneeling. The dog wagged its tail weakly. It was him. Eli's heart raced. The dog was frail and thin, but when Eli lifted him gently, he felt warmth, a living memory of his friend. Attached to the dog's collar was a piece of folded paper. Inside, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "To the boy who listened to the river, don't stop listening. There's a kindness in you the world needs. Ben." Tears filled Eli's eyes as he held the letter to his chest. He looked up at the flowing river and whispered, "I never stopped, old man. I never stopped." From that day forward, Eli made a promise. He would live like Ben had taught him. He repaired the old shack by the river, turned it into a small reading hut for children, and placed benches along the bridge. Every week, he brought kids from the town, poor, quiet, forgotten children, and told them stories. Just like Ben had told him, he taught them to fish, to listen to the sound of the water, to see beauty where others saw nothing. And whenever a child was sad, Eli would say softly, "Don't worry. The river talks to those who listen." One summer evening, a young boy named Sam came to the bridge. His father had left home, and he had stopped speaking in class. Eli noticed him sitting alone, throwing pebbles into the water. He walked over. "You like the river?" Sam didn't answer. Eli smiled gently. "It's okay. I didn't talk much either when I was your age." The boy looked up, curious. "You didn't?" "No," Eli said. "But an old man taught me that the river listens. You just have to tell it what's hurting you." Sam stared at the flowing water. Then quietly, he began to speak about his father, his anger, his sadness. Eli listened, nodding, just like Ben once had. When Sam finished, Eli said, "See? The river didn't take your words. It carried them. Someday it'll bring back peace." The boy smiled faintly for the first time in weeks. Over the years, Ben's bridge became more than just wood and water. It became a place of hope. Travelers stopped to rest there. Children played. Lovers carved their initials into the railings, and strangers left small notes of gratitude in a wooden box Eli had nailed to the post. Notes like, "Thank you for the food. I found this place when I needed peace. This bridge saved me." And every evening, as the sun painted the sky orange, Eli would sit with Rusty by his side, watching the river flow. Sometimes he swore he could hear a familiar voice in the wind. "Everything changes, lad, but kindness lasts." Years turned into decades. Eli grew old, his hair silver like Ben's once was. Rusty passed away peacefully by the fire, but the bridge still stood strong, the sign still shining in the sunlight. Ben's bridge, a place for kindness. Children who had once sat beside Eli now brought their children to hear his stories. He told them about old Ben, about the power of listening, about how one simple act of kindness can ripple like the river, spreading far beyond what the eye can see. One winter night, as the snow began to fall again, soft and silent, like the day he first met Ben, Eli sat alone on the bridge. He wore his old coat, the same one he'd worn as a boy, and in his hands he held Ben's walking stick. The moonlight shimmered on the river. Eli closed his eyes. "Ben," he whispered, "I kept the promise. The bridge is still here. The kindness is still alive." The wind brushed gently against his cheek, like a hand on his shoulder. For a moment he could almost hear Ben's laughter, deep and warm. He smiled, leaned back, and let the river sing him to sleep. When the townsfolk found him the next morning, he was sitting peacefully, eyes closed, a smile on his face. The sun rose over the bridge, turning the water into gold. After his passing, the people of Willowbrook gathered at the bridge. They built a plaque beside Ben's old sign that read, "In memory of Eli and Ben, two souls who taught us that kindness, like a river, flows forever," and beneath it, carved in Eli's handwriting, were the words he had once told a child. "The river listens. Be kind, and you'll hear it too."